Hello everybody, so Path of Exile 2 just had an absolutely gargantuan reveal stream, and they talked about literally everything that is going to be right at the start of PoE 2 Early Access. I'm gonna break down absolutely everything I can for you as quick as I can. Let's start here with actually playing the game. It is going to be free to play once it's outside of Early Access. So if you want to play for Early Access, you have to spend either $480 lifetime. However, for those of you who don't play PoE 1 or haven't spent that much, you can buy at least the $30 supporter pack that they just released. So once you do have access, what are you gonna get? Well, let's dive into the meat and potatoes here. So to start, there are going to be 3 acts for the campaign and 2 difficulties. Yes, you PoE 1 veterans, we are going back in time. We're going to cruel difficulty, baby. Let's go. 2 campaigns. So the normal campaign, they said for a brand new player, I don't know if that means for just Path of Exile or for action RPGs in general, they said it'll take about 25 hours to get through a 3-act campaign for a brand new player. 25 hours. That's quite a bit of content already. Then once you do that, before you reach the end game, which believe me, the end game of Path of Exile is a sight to behold. We'll get there in just one second. You then have to complete cruel difficulty of the exact same campaign that you just went through. The only difference is you have, your character's levels and gears and skills and all that stuff. Just think of that like a new game plus. So I would imagine that as a brand new player, again, it's about 25 hours-ish. And then when you go to cruel difficulty, new game plus, you can expect maybe like 10 hours. It depends on how well you excelled through the regular campaign, right? So maybe 10 hours, 7 hours, 5 hours even, I don't know. And then for us veteran Path of Exile players, Mark himself said that it takes him about 5 hours to complete it. So I expect we can be around that number as well. And then on cruel difficulty, maybe like 2 hours, 3 hours max. And then after you beat cruel difficulty, that's when you dive into the end game. But we'll talk about that in just one second. And then a final note for any of you that have like potential reservations about spending money for early access, GGG specifically stated that they plan to double the size of the entire game. So that means the campaign, the classes that you're choosing, and the in-game systems throughout early access. They want to double everything. So keep that in mind. All right, getting into the actual customization, what you're going to be playing in the game, starting with classes. There are 6 classes right off the start, and you have 2 ascendancy classes, not 3, 2 for each of those 6 classes. If you don't play PoE, just think of an ascendancy class like a class on top of your class with like ultra specific nodes that are very powerful. And another thing, if you don't play Path of Exile, every class can use everything except for the ascendancy class. So if I choose the warrior class, I can still use a bow and arrow. I can still use a fireball or something like that. I don't have to be a warrior with a big mace. The only restriction of your class is when you ascend to your ascendancy class, that is specific to the base class, but nothing else. And this also extends to the skills that you'll be using to kill monsters. They are not specific to a class. However, as a new player, you'll be getting a drop called an uncut skill gem. When you get one of these, what will happen is that it'll open up a menu. If you don't toggle a certain option, it'll open up a menu only for your class. So you'll be fitting like the theme of your class. If you choose the mercenary, for example, you're going to be like sticking to crossbow and mercenary type stuff. Whereas you could just toggle an option and then you see every single skill available to you at that given time, regardless of which archetype you chose. Also, a big difference here, if you do play Path of Exile 1, is that skills are no longer socketed in your gear, period. You just have a separate skill menu. You put your skills in there and then you put your support gems linked to each skill. And I don't know if I should say the word linked because I'm pretty sure there are no links anymore between the skills either. So long as a skill is socketed, you can just place the support gem in there and it will apply to the skill. So sockets are the only thing that matter on your skills themselves. However, that being said, sockets actually still do exist on your gear. You're just not putting your skills in there, you're putting runes into there. Where have I seen this before? And each rune just provides a passive benefit of some kind, like extra cold resistance, life, etc. And knowing that this is Path of Exile, the depth of this rune system has the potential to be expanded upon greatly. And you know that big, bad, scary passive tree thing that jump scares all the new players? Yeah, it's getting slightly more complex in Path of Exile 2 because you actually have 2 sets of passive skill points to use. You have normal points, which are gained simply from leveling up, and then you have these specialized skill points, which can act as normal points. So you just travel the tree, whatever path you want to take. You then get these specialized ones, which I believe are from certain quest rewards and certain boss kills, and then you can choose to spend them towards that normal path or to just go down a completely different path, which is linked to the other weapon that you're carrying. So in the menu, you can choose between your main weapon and then your swap weapon. And these specialized skill points, you can choose to allocate them specifically towards that swapped weapon. This creates a lot of interesting use cases. For example, if you're playing like a primarily fire damage sorceress and you also want to like combo with a big shock or something, you can have your main weapon be all fire damage related stats, your second weapon be shock or lightning damage specific stats, and then on top of that, in your skill tree, you can do only those specialized points into lightning damage, so that when you use your lightning skill, it'll automatically swap to your lightning weapon and use your lightning passives. Pretty cool idea. All right, that's all like the early game, just general info of Path of Exile 2. Now let's talk about the end game, because if you play PoE 1 or if you play Diablo or any other action RPG, you know that the meat and potatoes of any game, the creme de la creme, is the end game. And Path of Exile 1 has no shortage of that, and it looks like here in early access for Path of Exile 2, it's going to be the exact same. So the way that the end game works is it's kind of like you're mapping, but you have way more control over what each map does. So instead of maps, you'll be dropping waystones. Each waystone has prefixes and suffixes, but the prefixes exclusively modify the rewards of the waystone, while the suffixes exclusively modify the danger. So things like extra item drops and whatnot will always be prefixes, whereas all monster damage and speed and all that will always be suffixes. You will use these waystones inside of the Atlas, which is some gargantuan, they said, infinite, ever-expanding map screen, basically. And on the Atlas, you'll have specific nodes that you're dropping these waystones in, and the goal is to clear the corruption from that node, which you do by killing all of the rare and unique monsters in that node. And if you fail a node, guess what? Hey, better luck next time, buddy. Hey, you better go around, pick another one, because that node is no longer accessible. Goodbye. So as you're traversing these nodes throughout the Atlas, you'll be entering different biomes, and those will give you different waystone drops or different item drops specific to that biome. And you also find different things like big old towers, which reveal, a certain area around them, just pushes the fog of war out, different hideouts to unlock, that kind of stuff. And as you progress through the Atlas, socketing your waystones, completing nodes, etc., you will be getting Atlas skill tree points. The big difference here, if you play Path of Exile 1, is that the Atlas skill tree seems to be separated between just normal nodes, which increase the general monster things and general loot drops, and then the league-specific nodes, which you unlock by specifically completing that league mechanic. We'll get to that in 1 second. A final note about the general endgame is that, unlike in Path of Exile 1, where every single map has a unique boss in it, GGG said that this time around, waystones have about a 1 in 4 chance to contain a boss. And I don't know if every boss is going to be a league mechanic specific boss, or just like a general unique enemy, like they just like copied one out of the campaign, put it into the waystone, 1 in 4 chance to get one. They weren't exactly specific on that, but I would imagine it's just, whatever content you're doing, 1 in 4 chance of fighting a unique enemy inside of it. But the main draw of the endgame in Path of Exile is having true flexibility over doing the content that you want to do. In Path of Exile 2, we have 7 league mechanics to accomplish exactly that. First of all, shrines. They're just a random shrine, and they have some monsters around them. You kill the monsters, then you get the benefit of the shrine, like giga movement speed, experience gain, loot drops, shocking enemies, whatever it may be. If you play PoE 1, they're exactly the same thing. Strong boxes are also back. They're basically exactly the same thing as in PoE 1. They just look like they are spawning monsters slower. So you just find a box that has random stats on it. You open up the box, kill the monsters, a bunch of loot pops out. Essences are back as well, but it seems to be streamlined a little bit. It seems like you just have 2 tiers of essences, normal and greater. Maybe there are some other ones down the line, I don't know. But the normal ones just guarantee a mod of that type. So a life mod, a speed mod, a cold damage mod, etc. And then the greater essences do the same thing, but can be applied to magic items. So you have a magic item with like 2 mods that you like, then you slap an essence on it and it adds a guaranteed mod of that type while upgrading the item into rare. Pretty cool. Breach is also back. Mechanically, it seems to be basically the same thing, but the loot drops are quite a bit different. Number 1, this is where we are getting our catalysts, which you can apply if it's like Path of Exile 1 to your belt, your rings, and your amulet, which will increase things like all life stats, all resistance stats, etc. Normally, quality can be only at 20%, but you also get breach rings from the breach mechanic, which can roll up to 50% quality. Also, breach will contain one of the new pinnacle bosses, which is Zext. I don't know how to pronounce this. Zest. Ritual is also back, mechanically basically the same thing, except the omens are now specific to meta crafting, which has a lot of potential for the overall, complexity of the endgame and itemization. And the pinnacle boss is going to be the King of the Mist. Delirium is also back, basically mechanically the same thing, except this time it's dropping distilled emotions, which these emotions seem to be replacing 2 things. Number 1, delirium orbs, which previously you would apply to a map to apply just like delirium layers, which drop currency or jewelry or something like that and also make the map harder. And also oils from the blight mechanic. So you will use these distilled emotions to anoint your amulet with a passive tree of whatever you choose. And then the boss is going to be the, simulacrum encounter, which will have a pinnacle boss at the very end of it if you can make it there. And the final league mechanic that they talked about was expedition, which seems to be pretty much the exact same thing as in Path of Exile 1. Pretty cool. So as you are progressing through the Atlas, putting waystones in the different nodes and progressing towards content that you like to do, you will also find occasionally the endgame trials, which the trials are the way that you choose your ascendancy class. So each endgame trial will have 4 floors with, again, a pinnacle boss at the end of each floor. There are 2 variations of the trials that you can do. The first one is Sekama, and that is your source of jewels for the passive tree. And the jewel effects look vastly different than in Path of Exile 1. I won't go into too much detail, but it looks pretty cool. And the second version of the trial, the Chaos one, which is where the Trial Master resides, drops Val Orbs, which functionally are the same thing as in Path of Exile 1, but the modifiers that they're granting on your items are pretty different. They can add enchantments, which are basically like special implicits to an item. They give it more attack speed, more damage, like increase the magnitudes of all the explicit modifiers on it, stuff like that. It can reroll up to half the mods on the item. It can add a socket to the item, which remember sockets, you're putting in rune words, which give you additional stats like life resistances. So you can get additional sockets which do bypass the limit. They did mention that specifically. And then soul cores. And one final note here on the league mechanics is that while you are doing whichever league mechanic that you're doing, when you kill a pinnacle boss inside that league mechanic, you will then get points to spend on the Atlas skill tree for that league. This is a much different system from Path of Exile 1's Atlas tree, where you just get points by completing the maps and you can put them in any league mechanic right off the bat that you want to do. If you want to do league specific content, you have to kill that boss of the league. And you'll be encountering precedingly higher level bosses as you progress through the Atlas, so they'll be harder to kill, so it'll be way harder to get, all of the passive points for a certain league. At least that's their plan. Finally, as if everything I mentioned wasn't enough, there is a true pinnacle encounter. Think of like the Shaper right at the start of Atlas of Worlds in Path of Exile 1. The true big boy pinnacle boss is accessed by the Fortress. Apparently you'll need 3 separate keys dropping from various sources, I don't remember where, and then when you are inside of the Fortress, the actual boss is guarded by 3 uber act bosses, and then each of those guys have 2 lieutenants on top of that. So you're killing like 9 different dudes total just to even get a chance to fight the big boy pinnacle boss. And if you fail this encounter at any step, killing lieutenants, killing the act bosses, or killing the actual final pinnacle boss, you will fail the encounter and they will move on probably just to a different node on the Atlas, and you have to find the fortress again. So that is the ultimate goal that you will be working towards. And of course, yes, as you're doing all of this content, you're getting like unique items specific to each league. When you kill a specific boss, it has a chance to give its item. And you'll also be just getting the generally good stuff that can drop from any monster. Like there are so many layers of progression. If you've not played Path of Exile before or any action RPG, you should definitely consider checking out Path of Exile 2 because there seems to be a lot of content going for it. All right, that was the most concise that I could be because that live stream was a giant bomb of information. I will be making a metric booty butt ton of content on Path of Exile 2 once it does release on December 6th. So consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and also check out my stream at twitch.tv/WoolieGaming if you'd like to see me playing the game live. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.